Hello everyone. Hello to friends who are here in the classroom and hello to friends who are watching online. So in the previous session we looked at the various scholars with regards to human relations, movement, participative thought, behavioral thinkers. So when you'll see the session plan, there just the administrative thought has been mentioned. Okay, but if you look at the ecological theory, critical theory, we have done some movement on that already, right? So what we'll be doing is we'll be looking at systems theory briefly, the contingency approach, and through this we will be transitioning to the administrative behavior, right? And there we'll look at various aspects, whether that is communication, motivation, uh, uh, you know, content theories, traditional theories, leadership, etc. And when we'll exit that, we'll go to units like accountability and control and administrative law. Okay, so I hope that is something which is clear, right? So let's take up the systems, theory, and like every time we have a look at certain PYQs, so we'll be looking at them as well. Let me just pull those out. So you see, systems theory is an idea which is not always asked in isolation. It is always asked in conjunction. So whenever we look at the systems approach, we look at it with ecology, right? Ecology shaping the administration or ecological approach. So in its isolations, the system theory and the system approach is not been asked a lot. But when you will see certain scholars, okay, you will see that those scholars have used the systems approach very rigorously in their thesis. Okay, whether we look at the structural functionalism, that is the idea. So there are certain topics. For example, structural functionalism. Okay. Structural functionalism Parsons analysis that we saw. Also, you see, very importantly, when you will see Parsons' definition of public administration or how he views that public administration as a system, right? So that is how you should link these things up. Okay. Similarly, David Easton uses the systems approach. Similarly, if you will see Almond and Verba, कहाँ पढ़ते हैं हम Almond and Verba? Political culture, paper 2, है ना? The parochial, participant, this, that, threefold classification of the political culture. Okay? The basic idea of systems approach is very simple, that a system as a whole, a unified whole, consists of various subsystems and sub-entities. If any change occurs in that sub-entity, the entire system changes. Similarly, the broader application of systems approach would be that any system is not in isolation, it is in an environment. So that in that perspective, the environment becomes the larger system. So if a particular entity changes, then it changes the environment. So systems theory is a two-way process. It impacts the environment as well as gets impacted by it. Okay? It does not operate in vacuum. So whenever complex public administration phenomena are to be studied, and you need a framework to study them because no other clear framework is emerging. So whenever, let us say, Bernard is saying that an organization is a social system, so he is looking at it from a social lens. Right? Taylor or Fayol or Gulick and Ervik, they are looking at it from a technical lens. But if we want to find a true definition, we neither find it in Bernard nor we find it in Taylor. We find it in the ecological approach. Okay, true definition I would mean the most widely accepted one. You all know that the scope of public administration is ever changing. Okay, so in this complex situation where multiple dimensions, multiple perspectives like political, social, economic, cultural, technological are to be studied vis-a-vis organizations, vis-a-vis systems, vis-a-vis administration. Systems approach is a reliable, approach. Even that is present in the classical system. Because these very organizations, these very outlooks can be classified as closed or open. So if I look at classical organization, it's a closed system. Okay, but if I look at the modern organization, they are open system. Classical organizations are characterized by bureaucratic, top-down, hierarchical, rigid approaches. Whereas the modern organizations, as we understand them now, are open, social systems. Okay? So it helps us build a holistic perspective. Okay? In this, West Churchman actually identifies certain consideration, the 5 basic considerations in relation to the systems approach. This is something which a lot of you might know already because it is there in the works of Professor Bhattacharya, Mohit Bhattacharya. But still, I thought, we should take this up. Also, we will find the relevance of systems approach in the organizations unit. Okay, so we are touching upon it, and then we'll take it up more in relation to while we move from administrative behavior very quickly to organizations. Okay, so the considerations are, first one, the total objectives of the system and the measures of systems performance and the measures of system performance. The system's environment, second one, the system's environment that acts as a constraint, that acts as a constraint. Next, the system's resources that are employed, the system's resources that are employed. Next one, the system's components and their goals as well as activity. The system's components and their goals as well as activities. Next is the management of the system, including regulation and decision making. All right. So now let us transition into the administrative behavior, though we have taken up decision making before, right? But we'll be having a touch and go on it to incorporate views of other scholars. You see, decision making, if I can put it down to a single factor, which is the linchpin of the entire administration, it is the decision making. Because administrators have to make decisions often in compelling and challenging circumstances where there might not be clear choices. At times you have to negotiate those choices. There are no clear answers. There is no clear right or wrong. Also, we will have to understand that though certain thinkers, for example, our very own Simon, talked about rationality in decision making, or from the classical era, we have been talking about or emphasizing upon rationality. This rationality is always bounded. It is not just fact, but values also matter. And the decision making is not impervious to outside influences. It is always happening in an environment where multiple influences, both from within and outside, are there. Okay. However, if we look at the business administration, it is still less constrained vis-a-vis the public administration, because often the pulls and pressures are negligible when it comes to the public administration vis-a-vis the public administration. Okay. And therefore, decision making is a crucial part of administration. In private administration, it differs because the constraints are not so multifolded, whereas in public administration they are multifold. Okay. So decision making, Chester Bernard actually talks about it comprehensively, and he says that the process of decision making are largely the techniques for narrowing choices. Now, Weirich and Kuntz, it's W-E-I-H-R-I-C-H, Weirich and Kuntz. Now, note down this view because you can link it with the unit of planning. Decision making is the selection of a course of action. Decision making is the selection of a course of action from among alternatives. Semicolon. It is the core of planning. It is the core of planning. Now, Terry, George R. Terry, a decision is usually made within the guidelines established by policy. Okay, so he's looking at it from a policy lens. That means you have certain clearly defined peripheries. So it is not unbounded. It is bounded by the compulsions of that policy. Okay. Now we'll have to understand that any decision, though it is made, it is not an end. Rather, it's a means. Okay. For what? You are making a decision for what? For a certain goal in mind, by keeping a certain goal in mind. So decision itself is not an end, it's a means to an end. Okay? And they should be agile enough to be able to mold themselves as per the changing circumstances. That means they have to be situational. Therefore, decision making is also defined as a conscious human process involving both individual and social phenomena, comma, based on factual and value premises, which concludes with a choice of a behavioral activity. The choice of a behavioral activity from amongst the one or more alternatives. So whenever there will be decision making, you need to have a goal, alternatives. Because you see, it's a means, it's not an end. So the moment you remove a goal, there is no significance of a decision. Also, it's a dynamic process. It's a dynamic process. You often have time constraint, resource constraint, etc. Also, it is environmental or ecological. Also, it is a continuous and ongoing process. While this is there, it is also a rational plus intellectual process. You have to think, apply, and decision making involves an element of commitment and action. Okay? Also, when you are actually looking at it from the public administration organizational point of view, at an individual or a group level, right, you will have to account for personal differences, how they decide, what they decide, knowledge, institutional and personal factors. Okay? I am not getting into the process, identify the problem, this and that. That is something which is, not needed. You have read it. Yes, do involve the role of research, the comparative practices, experimentation, data, right? So those are there. Now, let us look at the typology. You see, decisions can be viewed from various lenses. The first typology can be personal and organizational. You see, both impact each other as well when an individual is working in an organization. Okay, then there can be routine and strategic. Policy decision or an operative decision. Okay. Program, non-programmed we have seen. Right. Similarly, if we look at the decision makers level, it can be an individual and group. Right. Obviously, each of these will have their advantages and disadvantages. So I have given you the typology. The first task for the day is to map each of these advantages and disadvantages. Okay. Then there are methods, for example, brainstorming. Do you know brainstorming? Does our friends know brainstorming? Friends who are watching online? Okay. ठीक है. Two techniques I want to add. I do not know whether all of you know it or not. Therefore, I am providing it. Dialectical inquiry. Dialectical inquiry. You see, at the heart of dialectical inquiry is nothing but the full consideration of alternatives. So what happens that these alternatives, whichever are available, are divided into two sides that debate the advantages and disadvantages of a proposed solution or decision. It's similar to what do we call as devil's advocacy. Right? Just to show the other side of the coin. Okay? So that all possible alternatives are scanned, examined. Another method that I want to talk about is Delphi technique. Delphi technique is a group decision making process. You see, in today's organizations are matrix, distributed, decentralized kind of organizations. है ना? People are working from homes, across geographies, somebody sitting in Goa on a beach, having a laptop and, taking a meeting. I wish we could teach like that. ठीक है. So the point is this, that a group decision making where the group is not at a single physical location. So now what happens, just like an animator or you have that scrum manager, people in IT would be familiar. Okay. So individuals in these groups are asked separately, okay, to provide their inputs at various stages. You can use an email, you can use a fax, messaging, online, etc. And other group members actually rank their initiative. See, they are not in the simultaneous conversation. It is shared, it's like making a note and everybody is now commenting on those notes of everybody else. Okay. And after each process, the alternatives are ranked. And finally, a consensus decision is arrived. Now, this technique is a good technique because first, it provides information to all. It helps in viewing the counter perspective. But, you see, there are factors. Because the social cultural factors, which is beyond the organization, can impact. How? For example, an American, a British, an African, a Chinese, an Indian, they all are the part of the group. And let us say, this is a part of a multilateral, sort of a UN grouping which is there. And they need to make some recommendations regarding women empowerment. So all of them will have a cultural lens to see it. The Americans and the British might be far liberal, whereas the Asian, Chinese and Africans might be not so liberal. Right? Also, the political ideologies might differ. So for example, from India we send somebody from a CPI. So that person will talk about giving benefits rather than an entrepreneurial scheme for women. I mean, SEO, I would not take it at the face value. Why? Because if you look at SEO, it's a defense and security focus is there. So you have a very limited field. The canvas is fairly narrow, diverse yet narrower. Any summit for that example that is there, but they are actually not making decisions. They are somehow coming to a common agenda, and most of the groundwork is done by the foreign service. Okay, but the demographic diversity can actually have both the kind of effects, positive as well as negative. Okay, because they may have to overcome the social biases that they have. But if you manage this process effectively, it's going to generate a far wider, far qualitative outcome. Okay. Similarly, group decision making, like I said, has its own advantages and disadvantages. Because group decision making, you'll have to come at a consensus or walk out. Right. Also, things like operational research, data analytics, etc. can help. Linear programming, cost benefit analysis, okay, game theory, queuing theory, decision trees, they are there. So when we talk about all these things, you can, or rather you should use it. There is a unit, techniques for administrative improvement. You think only MIS, PERT, e-governance, pass. There are multiple ways. So, right, game theory is another one. Everybody knows game theory, right? Okay. So, link it with that. Okay, how? Because ultimately, either you are making a policy decision or an operative decision. And these things help. Now, there are challenges with respect to decision making in administration. You see, administration has become such a gigantic phenomenon that most of the energies of that administration gets utilized in routine aspects. Okay? So that is a problem. So the higher level executives should not get into the routine aspect. That is why you see decentralization is being talked about. Delegation of powers is being talked about. Why this is important? Because if, let us say, the Prime Minister is going to decide what color will be there of a rail wagon, I mean, holi up, right? So that is the problem. Also, now understand it from this lens, that this canvas is getting broader. You see, in the developed world, there will be few strategic decisions which will be taken, other things will run on autopilot. Also, because of the lack of diversity and lack of public services demand, will narrow down the scope of decision making. Whereas in a developing country, the competing priorities will be higher, right? The complexity will be higher. There will be caste dynamics, class dynamics, etc., etc. And hence, the prioritization is again an issue. So the Prime Minister might have to choose between, let us say, attending a global conference or inaugurating a hospital. Whereas nobody will call Trump, oh sorry, Biden. Right, Trump is not the president yet. Right. So nobody is going to call Trump or Biden or Obama to inaugurate a hospital. But in India, the Prime Minister can. Also, rules, regulations pose a challenge. Because if you oversimplify them, that might lead to bypassing of necessary checks. But if you overemphasize them, it might lead to delayed outcomes or no outcome at all. Also, bias is again an issue. Okay. So there are various methods to keep away bias, rationality, rules and regulations, laws, etc., avoiding conflict of interest, things like that. Okay. What is a good decision? A good decision is action oriented. It should instill or bring about goal directed behavior, right? Also, you see influence, intuition, personal morality, values, they also play a role. Now, if you look at democracy and decision making in a democracy, what type of approach to decision making it is? Bargaining. Competing interest, bargain. Whereas whenever we talk about democratic decentralization, whenever we talk about involving people in the decision making, we are referring to as participative decision making. Now, what will you call decision making in the NPM era? अरे भाई, public choice approach. What will you call decision making in the classical era? Rational approach. Okay. So if you look at the theories, while we have seen Simon already, there are two approaches which are used. One is the rational and other is the incremental. What you are saying? Rationality and incremental. So similar is the kind of the approach which you see in policy making as well. So those approaches largely remain the same. You all have the idea of those approaches? Okay, how is strategic decision making different from routine? So Saurabh, strategic decision making would not be a regular affair. You would be arriving at a situation to actually make a decision. For example, making airstrikes or opening up a sector. It's a strategic decision. Routine decision would be to penalize a wrongdoer under the established law. If line of control has been breached in terms of firing, we retaliate. That's routine decision making. So strategic decision making is of great consequence. Okay, understood? All right. So rational would mean that you isolate the problem, see the cost benefit analysis, right? See the alternatives. So at the heart of the rational decision making approach is a person who's perceived as rational. Using the intelligence, using the objectivity that the person has. Okay? Of course, there are problems with it. How can you say that a person is absolutely rational, etc., etc.? I hope that is clear, right? If there are any queries, do ask me in the mentorship session. Okay? Now, I want to draw your attention towards certain questions that have been asked. And not many questions have been asked from decision making. It says the process of decisions dot 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 is largely a technique of narrowing choices. किसका व्यू है ये? Narrowing choices लिखवाया था ना, अभी लिखवाया है ना? Chester Bernard. Okay. So this statement was asked in 2023 also, recently. The process of decision is largely a technique of narrow choices. Explain. Simple idea. The brownie points was that you use Bernard, right? And you talk about how it is about narrowing choices. Herein, you can use examples like Delphi technique. The manifestation of those narrowing choices. Okay? चलिए ठीक है. Next, let us look at communication. Communication. You see, communication is a very essential part. It is akin, in the views of scholars like Bernard, it's like lifeblood of an organization. Okay, because communication helps you exchange ideas. It helps you not just exchange ideas and views, but also to communicate decisions, orders, get feedback, identify, isolate the problem, define goals, right? Convey instructions, right? So, Millett, John D. Millett, regards the communication as the bloodstream of administrative organization. Similarly, Fifner, it says that it is at the heart of the management. Now, please understand, the communication on its own is vital, and you will have to understand that we are now living in an IT revolution era, which has not only increased and further complexized the scope, reach, diversity, complexity of communication. This is an age of communication. And the modern administration actually survives on effective communication, and hence the effectiveness of communication is very important, for which the efficiency and effectiveness of the organization, the attainment of goals, depend. The organization within has to communicate and also has to communicate without. Also, all organizational processes involve communication. Also, to manage, whether it is the man management or the people's management, resource management, etc., any sort of management, you need communication, because it helps promote participation, bring about cooperation, collaboration, teamwork. So in this light, Millett defines communication as shared understanding of a shared purpose. Okay. In this light, an Indian scholar, Shobhana Khandawala, Shobhana says, communication is generally understood as spoken or written words, but in reality, it is more than that. Full stop. It is the sum total of directly or indirectly, comma, unconsciously or consciously transmitted words, attitudes, feelings, actions, gestures, and tones. Even silence is a communication. A twist of face, a gesture, that is also communication. So this is a human centric view of communication, not the organizational or structural functional view. Okay. Also, you see, communication is a management tool to exercise control, supervision. As Simon says, our very own Herbert Simon, that communications can be formally defined as any process whereby decisional premises are transmitted from one member of the organization to another. Now, how will managers use communication? See, you will have to look at communication from administration point of view, from management point of view, in relation to goals, in relation to environment, in relation to interpersonal aspects, in relation to group dynamics, in relation to individual decision making. Okay, so if I'm looking at it from the top, communication is used to transmit the goals and objectives to the larger workforce. So all your theories where we were aligning people, Maslow, etc., what is being used? Communication. Okay. Also, communication helps in reducing friction, conflict, tension. It is like, according to Terry, it is like a lubricant for the smooth operations of the management processes. Also, communication is vital to decision making. Now look at the classical view. Gulik and Urbik. Take any element, any or many element, and subtract communication for it from it. It will collapse. And the moment any element of this collapses, the administration collapses. So simply, post-decorb minus communication is equals to suboptimum or failed administration. This is how you can represent. Okay? It acts as a via media or a tool to bring about motivation, morale. Peter Drucker says, good communication is the foundation for sound administration. Any administrative activity, communication is needed. Now I am not getting into a verbal, non-verbal communication, nor I am talking about that personality development class kind of a phenomena, sender, receiver, things like that. That is something which is well known, right? And I'm not getting into it. The formal communication, informal communication, vertical communication, horizontal communication, crosswise communication, right? See this with regards to things like how a communication, this is your work. See how communication is happening in a hierarchy, how it is happening in a scalar chain, how it is happening in a linking pin model. Okay. Nor I am talking about barriers to communication. I mean, that is something which is known. Now let me have a look at the questions. You see, the kind of questions that are being asked from communication. 2018, a 20 marker. Question number 3A. Communication represents the nerves of government. Carl Duche. How can the communication system in the government be made more effective, responsive and motivational? Simple question. If I say lifeblood, if I say at the heart of organization. So you might not know who Carl Duche is, but the point is that you can simply copy that statement intelligently in the answer and use Bernard and other analogies to define it. Support that similar views are being echoed by Bernard, similar views are being echoed by, let us say, Drucker, etc. Okay. Then after a long gap, there was this question in 2022. Strategic communication ought to be an agile management process. Discuss the conceptualization of strategic communication for governmental actions. Do this PYQ. Do this PYQ. This was 3C, a 15 marker in 2022 on strategic communication. Okay. समझ में आ गया? Next is morale. You see, morale, whenever we look at, we are looking at an individual's state of mind vis-a-vis the task that person has. In an organizational setup, I'll be looking at morale with a state of mind of a functionary or a worker or a team member with respect to the work environment. Okay. LD White says, morale is both an index of a sound employment situation and a positive means of building an efficient organization. It is reflected in the socio-psychological situation, a state of mind. So if the morale will be high, the person will contribute to the organization. If the morale is low, the person will not contribute to the organization. Also, you see, morale can be a double-edged thing. It is not always it is leading to the positive outcomes. Right? So all your theories which are probably looking at, let us say, needs, they are all looking at things like morale and motivation only. Okay, all your leadership theories, they are doing what? They are doing the same thing. So it's an emotional condition, it cannot be empirically measured. Okay? But subjectively, you can still rate people. You can still identify areas, for example, levels of job satisfaction. Okay? Pride in the job and being a part of the group. Okay? The level of involvement of a functionary in an organization. Financial satisfaction. All of these things are correlated with morale. Then motivation. Again, it is something which is seen in reference to the job environment. Right? So motivation is a product of an individual and a situation's interaction. So that might be a positive motivation or that might be a negative motivation. Okay, and it can vary from individual to individual and within the same individual from time to time. Some of you might be highly motivated to study. Some of you might be highly demotivated to study. Okay. Also, motivation is not a monolith. It's a combination of multiple desires, needs, drives, pushes, pulls. Okay. So it's a personal feeling. But in classicals also, whenever we are talking about motivation, morale, we will have to bring in elements. For example, differential piece rate system, Taylor. Okay. Or the idea of mental revolution. Right?
Sir, in communication we can use Foley.
Yes, you can use Foley.
Because to conflict resolution.
Depersonalizing orders and all those things. It is what? It is a form of a formal communication that is coming from a situation and not from a individual. So that communication is a neutral communication that will tend to have a positive effect. You can use Foley, no issues. Okay. Also, different motivators and demotivators or non-motivator elements can be there. For example, there can be financial motivators, incentives, bonuses, salaries, increments. Non-financial motivators can be rewards, promotion, status, pride, medals, citations, greater authority, etc. Now, multiple scholars have worked on motivation, right? Maslow's need hierarchy theory, Herzberg two-factor theory, all of them are there. So let us broadly look at the theories of motivation. Okay. Now, before I get into theories, let me actually tell you a process. The process is that this motivation and leadership theories are closely related. So you should remember that the permeability of one into another and vice versa is a lot. Okay, I'll talk about the leadership theories when we'll come there. But motivation, see the nature of questions that is there. So it can be anything, traditional, content, process, contemporary, anything. Simple question. Maslow's need hierarchy of needs and Frederick Herzberg two-factor theory have commonalities in the analysis of human motivation. Okay, then 2020. So after 2017, it is 2020. Performance information use is a form of organization behavior that is influenced by individual job, organizational and environmental factor. Okay. Then again, more content and process theories of motivation have same focus but different approaches. So you see, comparison is the central theme that we can draw. Okay, more Again, 2021, examine the approach of public service motivation as an inducement in bringing about desired level of efficiency in public service delivery. Somebody asked this question today in the group, WhatsApp group. A PYQ. So here you will have to use also morale idea, because it is coming from within and then aligning it with new public service and other aspects. Then again, motivation theories, intrinsic motivation. Thank you. Intrinsic motivation in comparison to extrinsic motivation leads to enhanced performance and creativity. Again, it is referring to the inside of a human being aspect.
Pride and then
Exactly, all those things. So you can draw from self-actualization, because beyond monetary needs, beyond status needs, there would be individual drive which will be there. Then again, 2023, a 15 marker. You see, repeat. Two-factor theory entails certain factors in workplace resulting in job satisfaction, while others, if absent, lead to dissatisfaction. Discuss. Why same thing. So while we talk about Herzberg theory, there are motivators and demotivators. So it is talking about that. So comparison and these theories are largely the theme that are being touched upon by the UPSC. But nonetheless, let us have a broad idea of the theories in a systematic manner. Traditional. If I talk about traditional, what it will be? Just think narrow, inward, mechanistic. That if A is there, then B will happen. If A dash is there, B dash will happen. So what kind of theories will you actually associate with it?
system model.
Array Taylor scientific method, SMT. Whatever motivation in SMT is there or CMT is there, it is traditional. Whereas the critiques, the behavioral will present the critique. Bernard says that the traditional, the monetary rewards are insufficient. He talks about non-monetary factors like distinction, prestige, personal power, etc. So they adopt a carrot and stick approach. Whereas if we look at the content theories, okay, they are looking at the content, that is by the name as it says, job content. What is the kind of the job, the nature of the job, and how it can bring about the motivation, alignment of personal goals and the organizational goals. So it is talking about a far metaphysical level, whereas the traditionals were talking in the very physical, mathematical sense. Maslow, Herzberg, ERG, ERG थोड़ी पता है ना? Eldefers ERG theory पता है? Friends watching online, yes, Saurabh, very correct about communication. Saurabh, do you know ERG? He knows. Chalo, let me give you a brief on that. Okay. There will be many theories. Please understand. There might be certain theories that you do not know. It's fine. Okay. Then there is McClelland's achievement theory. I am not getting into the criticisms or this and that. Okay, there's no point. But since most of you do not know ERG theory and McClelland's theory, let me give an explainer on them. Okay. So you see, it's a variation of Maslow's need hierarchy theory. It is called as ERG theory, as in existence, relatedness and growth. Now you must be understanding that these are the pillars. It is also a needs theory. Okay, so it is also a needs theory. You see, while Maslow's theory was considered to be idealistic, there was this criticism that Maslow presents a need hierarchy which is unidirectional and absolute. Okay, so this is considered as a ideal idea, a conceptual idea, whereas ERG theory, as being claimed, it has a realistic application. Okay, so the existing, Maslow's hierarchy, which is 5 levels, है ना? 5 ही है ना? Right. He says it can be 3. The existence would include all forms of psychological and material desires. यही होगा ना? See? Psychological and material desires. Relatedness would include relationships with other people. That is the social needs, as well as a bit of the esteem needs. So somewhere here, you see, growth needs would include the remaining portion. But this is just a rearrangement. This is not the core of Eldeffer's ERG analysis. Eldeffer says, that at a given point, more than one need can be in operation. Okay? So you see, if he says that the path towards the realization of a particular need, let us say, is blocked, so the individual will continue to persist on that path, at the same time will try and achieve something else. Just like you all are trying to crack UPSC, but by the time first, second attempt, third attempt passes, you realize that यार plan B तो create करना पड़ेगा. So you start going for SSC, banking, EPFO, CAPF, right? State PCSs, etc. कि हाँ कुछ तो चाहिए, right? So that is at the essence of this ERG model. Okay. So what happens that if somehow due to situations the pursuance or the desire to pursuance or the ability to pursue a higher order need gets subdued, second order or third order or other order needs take precedence. So that means the desire to satisfy a lower level of need increases. Whereas Maslow was saying what? Individual will remain at a certain level until a higher order is realized. So it is far more amorphous in nature, the ERG model. So ERG comes across as flexible, whereas Maslow's comes across as rigid. Also, there is no order that he is prescribing. He is saying, let us say you are not being able to realize this, does not matter. You might be having another need you are working on. It can be a higher level or a lower level. This idea of switching the needs has been termed by Aldefer as a frustration regression approach. Why I am giving the name of this approach in the end? Because if I had given the name in the first instance, you would have not understood it. Frustration regression model or a frustration regression approach. Understood? Okay. Next. So this will help you critique Maslow, Herzberg, as well as this thing, but chiefly it is related to Maslow. Okay. Then McClelland's theory. It is also a need-based theory. He is actually classifying the needs in three basic aspects. That is need for power, need for affiliation, and need for achievement. This is how he denotes. See how it is denoting it. Okay, so these denotions matter. So you see, McClelland actually found that people with high power need, people who want to acquire power, will have a great concern on how will they exercise influence and control. And therefore they will align it with the goals of the organization. So these are the people who will seek leadership. You will see that the traits of these persons will be outspoken, hard-headed, determined, demanding. They enjoy teaching and public speaking. ठीक है? हालांकि we are poor teachers, we don't have a lot of power. Okay, but ठीक है? They are not flexible or people-centered.
How not flexible? Because sorry, people centered
Because they are hard-headed, they are forceful. Okay, they want like people who stay ahead of the curve kind. So they are not flexible. They would want others to tune to them, not they to tune to others. So that kind of inflexibility which is there. People with higher affiliation need, they will have a feeling that I should be loved. So they tend to avoid being rejected by a social. So they will be far more people sensitive. But these people can actually function in democratic organizations. You see, extending the argument. In a place where everybody is with an equal level of intellect, in a place where the intellectual hierarchy is there, the people with power needs will be able to lead better. So the clear difference between, let us say, Modi ji and Rahul Gandhi, है ना, यही है. जिस पे दिमाग होगा वो अपनी चलाएगा, जिस पे दिमाग नहीं होगा वो कहेगा हाँ ऐसे भी कर लो वैसे भी कर लो, सबके साथ कर लो. So they actually derive pleasure from being loved and avoid the pain of being rejected. Friendly interaction, okay? But this kind of need wherever will be there, okay? You will have other people actually taking advantage of this, because this will lead to undermining of managerial objectivity. You will be blurred, blinded by views. Okay? And hence it will affect the decision making ability and efficiency of decision making. Whereas need for achievement, wherever it will be high, there will be an intense desire for success and immense fear of failure. Okay? People like them need to be challenged. They set difficult goals. Remember, not impossible or utopian goals. They adopt a realistic approach. So you will see workaholics. They are such people. Also, they can make good leaders, but they have a tendency to demand too much from their peers. Result driven people. So these are people who have that entrepreneurial zeal. So if I say in the modern NPS era, the bureaucrat should have which need?
It should be a combination.
It should be a combination, right? I understand. But which need should dominate?
Affiliation, achievement.
No, the achievement need. We need a result-oriented bureaucracy. Whereas in the traditional bureaucracy, the power need dominate. Okay, so this is how you will have to actually put these things up. Yeah, isolation में नहीं हो रहा है कहीं. This is not happening in isolation. Please. So whenever you talk about bureaucracy in the modern era, as per Nickland's theory, their achievement need should be high for result orientation. एक आप लिखेंगे, one you will write result oriented bureaucracy. Within bracket, McClelland's. So it immediately elevates the weight. It provides that heft to your answer.
Elon Musk has this type of tendency.
Elon Musk has this type. I told you, I gave you the characteristics. People like entrepreneurs. So whenever we are talking about NPS, NPM, we are taking the leaf out of the entrepreneurial government era, where the bureaucrats need to be result oriented, not the power oriented. Whereas in a democracy, the politicians need to be affiliation oriented. Of course, it will be a combination. So through these yardsticks, basically it is not about either or situation. It is about, let us say this is the entire pie. How you will distribute that pie. based on various situations. Okay? Understood?
Yes.
Then of course you have McGregor. McGregor. That is also looking at that. If we look at the McGregor, the theory X and theory Y, it is also the content idea of motivation. ठीक है? Understood? ठीक है. Next देखते हैं process theories. Process theories. So far understood? Need for affiliation is more result oriented. Yes, Saurabh, it is result oriented. Both result oriented, yet it is a risky approach, but a realistic approach to risk. Entrepreneurship, high degree of achievement, etc. You see, the need for achievement will have an element of the need for power as well. It won't be, need for achievement will not be present in isolation.
When you have achievement, you prefer for desired power.
Vice versa. If you have a need for achievement, automatically you will have a need for power, and the moment you have need for power, that acts as a fuel for achievement. In realistic scenarios, of course. Okay. Now, with regards to process theory, Adams equity theory, ये पढ़ा है? You see, equity theory is based on the perception of an individual of being treated in an equitable manner. Okay. So we are actually looking at the behavioral psychology of an individual working in an organization space. You see, it says that the employee will become demotivated both vis-a-vis the job as well as the employer. If they will have a feeling that they are giving far more to the job than the job is giving to them. So that will lead to what? Reduction of effort, disgruntlement. At times they can lead to being disruptive as well. So the moment you are being treated inequitably, then there is a problem. Then there is VIE theory. Victor Vroom. Expectancy theory. It is also called as expectancy theory. So people will work for a goal if they really feel that the goal is worthy. Okay. Also, when their effort towards the goal attainment will be acknowledged. Okay. So, in this three factors, valence, instrumentality, and expectancy. Valence, instrumentality, and expectancy dominate. Valence would mean the value of the perceived outcome. What is in it for me? Instrumentality would mean that if I will do something, it will lead to something. That means a clear path. Expectancy would mean that I will be able to complete it, my own capability. So you show something desirable to individuals. You say that, see how easy it is. And then invoke their self-belief to achieve something. Just like I am doing with you all. That yes, we together can crack these means. Okay? Based on your desire, my belief in you, in your abilities, awakening you to your beliefs. So folks like us are like Jamwand in Ramayana, who actually use the VIE theory to motivate Hanumanji. ठीक है, ये समझ में आ रहा है? Once you have understood this, nothing is impossible. Relate it. Relate it. So obviously ambitious goals will be set. Okay? There are multiple theories that you will find. Reinforcement theories will be there. Okay? Then there will be Porter and lawyers expectancy model. So have a gist of them. Okay? That what do they mean? Just like I told you, this is something. Okay, VIE. Jamwand Hanumanji's argument. Now it must be very clear. क्या है मुद्दा? इस तरीके से, like this, we will have to be very clear. Okay. Understood? Understood, friends who are watching online? Because there is no point. I'll keep on talking about, there are probably 20, 30 theories that are there. Okay, no point in taking them up all. I have told you the PYQs, they have largely revolved here, but in leadership and in other places you can use them. Okay, then there are contemporary theories. You see, contemporary theories are largely nothing but an extension of the expectancy school. Okay. Now, expectancy school was again, you see, using some kind of a goal, some kind of a carrot, some kind of a tangible, idea to be given, so that beholden to which you will start working. Okay, that was the idea. Contemporary theories actually broaden the scope of this idea only. Okay, that they are looking at a broader array of factors or the motivational traits other than just the achievement. Okay. So while they will also focus on expectancy, value and achievement goals, right? For example, can I do it? Values would mean desires and preferences. Do I want it? And then goals will capture why am I doing this? Okay. Done any contemporary theories? Have you done any contemporary theories? हाँ विवेक कुछ पढ़ा है?
Yes, sir.
क्या है?
Basically, it was operational, sorry, organizational base.
कौन सी थ्योरीज हैं? थ्योरीज के नाम तो होंगे. सौरभ, हैव यू स्टडीड एनी कंटेम्पररी थ्योरीज ऑफ मोटिवेशन? नहीं, चलो कोई बात. मैं बताता हूँ. I'll tell you briefly. Right, just remember the essence. No need to go into a lot of details back home as well. Three primary theories come within this. One is the attribution theory. Okay, so attribution theory was given by Heider, Heider. It is a psychological theory. Okay, basically what they did was they developed a paradigm, a sort of a framework to actually study the attributes. Okay, and therefore it was called as attribution theory. So a theoretical framework was developed based on common sense psychology. Okay, so at the crux of it is that the learners are strongly motivated by the pleasant outcome of being able to feel good about themselves. How individuals actually perceive events and how it influences their thinking and behavior. At the core of it, it is a theoretical idea to look into or to determine why people do what they do. Why people do what they do. ठीक है, कोई क्या कर रहा है और क्यों कर रहा है. ओ सॉरी, मतलब why people do what they do. जो भी कोई कुछ कर रहा है वो क्यों कर रहा है.
Inner motivation basically.
नहीं, आउटर मोटिवेशन भी हो सकती है. What are the attributes which are pushing that person to do?
that.
Okay, it can be from within, it can be from without. Okay, so the one will be from within will be called as an internal attribution. What external is there will be called as an external attribution. What you are drawing as inferences. Okay, that is the attribution theory. Next is the self-efficacy theory. It was popularized by Albert Bandura. Interesting name. Basically believes about the ability. Here the focus is on observational learning, social experience, and reciprocal determinism how a personality is developed. For example, the questions will be asked, do I have the required skills to perform this task? So you are talking about beliefs in one's own capability to achieve certain goals. I can do it, I can do it, I can do it. That kind of attitude. Last but not the least is helplessness theory. It is about understanding the meaning of I cannot. Helpless. It's by Seligman. Basically realizing the limitations, what I can do and what I cannot do. Okay? Understood? इससे ज्यादा जानने की इसके बारे में जरूरत नहीं है एग्जाम के लिए. So that completes the idea of motivation. Seligman. Okay. Just like we have seen motivation, we now have the leadership. Again, there are various theories. Okay, but first we'll try and decipher the scholarly views on leadership, right? And then we will look at the various theories. I'll list them down just like we talked about ERG and others. For ones that which are not very commonly covered, we will take them up. But before that, let me take you to the questions that are asked on leadership. And very frequently this area has been asked. Okay. Now you see straight away theories are being asked. Let me tell you the trap here. The trap here is that what happens when you see a theory that you know, for example, managerial grid, Blake and Mouton, you end up dumping everything like notes. That is not the correct way. Because the question will have a statement or two that will set the context. So you will have to see that particular theory in relation to that context and reinforce that context. Yes, the theoretical arguments will remain the same. The details of the theory will remain the same. But you will have to connect it. You will have to make a bridge. Because without connection, there will be a problem. With your existing knowledge base, okay, so you will get X marks. Once you make that connection, the chances are that you will get X plus Y marks, Y points for staying context. And that is what can make a difference. A lot of you have told me that I've got these many marks, these many marks, these many marks. And you can really excel in mains over your previous attempts if you keep, yourself committed to the idea of details. Just one notch higher level work. Not much polishing is needed. With your existing knowledge base, with better interconnections that we are trying to draw in class, certain semantics, like I was telling about McClelland's and putting things in bracket and things like that, you can get that. You will end up attempting 38 questions, both paper 1 and paper 2. Right? If you can make a difference of 1 mark in every question, automatically your existing score will become plus 40 approximately. without any existing additional sort of knowledge base, something that you know already, just how you can better present it. That's it. Forget about the enrichment, analysis, even interlinkages. If you can make better interlinkages, then this can become plus 80. So those of you who are actually, hovering around 200 can really propel yourself. But just this little effort. And those who are in the bracket of 220, some of you are there, 220s, 230s, you can even cross 300. Yes, after 280, 285, every mark is a fight in public administration, but people have achieved 300 in the past. Okay, so be very careful with regards to this. All right. With regards to leadership again, largely questions have been in and around theory. Okay, uh, for example, in 2016. Now you see, Blake and Mouton define leadership style based on two dimensions: concern for people and concern for production. Basically referring to Blake and Mouton's theory, managerial grid. In the light of the statement, discuss managerial grid model, explain with reason which one of the following style is best. Now a lot of you will start, like Blake and Mortons have been one of the very prominent scholars, right, who have worked on leadership. Array, set a background, 2 lines. Leadership is a vital element in the overall organizational effectiveness. Various models have been developed. One of the most widely subscribed model is Blake and Mouton's managerial grid. Okay, so things like that, these little things. So if you see, the question is simple, just Blake and Mouton's leadership model. Now 2017, 10 marker. You see, leaders do the right things, managers do them rightly. A quote by Warren Bennis. Is this distinction by him valid? Now the concept division between leadership and management. So certainly leaders have just a diagram like this. A wider sphere. Whereas the manager's task is to get the work done. Leader's task is far bigger. A diagram like this can really elevate your answer. And with this, if you can write the functions, just represent it like this. यहाँ हम बात कर रहे हैं लीडर की, यहाँ हम बात कर रहे हैं मैनेजर. That's it. Now again see a statement, and this time they have given Napoleon 2018. A leader is a people's developer. So the human-centric motivation, morale, problem solving, conflict resolution, all of it is coming in. Which aspects of subordinate development can positively be influenced by a leader? So you will find answers in the leadership theory. Managerial grid hai aur hai. Okay. Now see this question. 2019, and they have used Bernard. Chester Bernard, in the functions of the executive, injected the social in the study of organization. Explain in this context how the executive is expected to play much greater role than a manager. Same question, how a leader differs from a manager. Same question, exactly same question. Just phrase different. ठीक है जी. Next, again 2020, 15 mark. Organizations of the future will be organic adaptive structures, but temporary systems. Discuss how Warren Bennis characterizes the new form of organizations. We have talked about Bennis organization. We exactly talked about this aspect, organic adaptive structures. बात की थी ना last class में. ठीक है. Next, 2021 15 marker. Nothing in public administration. 2016 we saw very simple, straightforward. Now you see the questions are becoming contextual, but at their core it remains the same, where you will apply those theories. Whereas question number 1 that we talked about 2016, it was more about understanding and retention. Now the questions are moving towards highly application oriented character. Okay, see 2021 it says nothing in public administration is more important, interesting, or mysterious than leadership. Analyze the statement in the context of strategic leadership. So now you will have to know what are these strategic scenarios where the inputs are imprecise but the stakes are high.
Yes, the individual trait of a leader comes.
Individual trait of a leadership will come, but also the strategic direction will be decided by certain foundational principles. For example, if today India has to take a decision, yes, the personality trait of a leader would matter, but the point is it cannot alone take you to a good decision. It will have to be guided by something. For example, let me give you the example in context of, let us say, the Russia-Ukraine conflict and India importing Russian oil. So the strategic decision where the world was actually, the Western powers were actually sanctioning the Russia. So what you were supposed to do? If you are only guided by how the headwinds are, you would have said, no, 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 we will also not buy. But the strategic decision was to balance strategic autonomy, the doctrine of strategic autonomy coming to use, suing for peace, because that is our foundational value system as a nation, India. Right? So we are being guided by our foundational values, rules, and principles. At the same time, when the scenario is uncertain, we are actually using our leverage. That is where the leadership personality trait is coming up. But that heft of personality is coming from where? It is coming from where India is uniquely positioned, one, and two, how India is valued across the world based on the character of India. So the economic heft is the practical reality, right? Our foundational values are our psychological reality. And then the leadership is coming.
I was talking about the mystical aspect of leadership.
Mystical aspect of the trait theory or the charismatic theory that you are talking about, that is largely for domestic purpose. Mr. Modi is respected internationally because India is respected internationally, not only because who he is. Understand, Dr. Manmohan Singh was a great economist, renowned world over, respected for what he was. But at that time, the image of India was not so good. That is why gaffes like Sharm el Sheikh, etc. happened. So this is administration, leadership working at the international level. Similarly, at a local level, how it is happening? We'll have to see that. So I often take IR as an example because that instantly strikes the chord. This is something which is very contemporary. Now, forget about Russia-Ukraine conflict. Take up India's leadership vis-a-vis the representation of the global south, or for example International Solar Alliance, or regarding the climate change and the threat that is there for the littoral states, the island territories, the Fiji, the Solomon Islands, things like that. Right? For example, you can take the example of freedom movement. There also you can take. Okay? Something which is very popular, a view which is very popular will anyway gets the fuel. Next, 2022. So increasingly you see these words, these adjectives are getting into the lexicon of UPSC. See, transformational leadership. requires high degree of coordination, communication and cooperation. So first you have to understand what is transformational leadership. Okay, it is saying coordination, communication, cooperation. So coordination, communication, cooperation. The structure is fairly simple. How transformational leadership can use each of them to align align the members to achieve a goal. Simple सी बात है. Now for coordination, communication, this you use the various theories and reinforce each point. That is it. That is the framework for writing answer. Then again 2022, one more question. This was 4A. Okay. And the earlier question was 2B. So you see how it is distributed. Either you will have to skip both and then attempt question number 3, which again had a strategic communication aspect. So administrative behavior gets distributed across question number 2, 3, 4. कुछ तो करना पड़ेगा ना. You cannot leave. Exactly. So it is being asked again and again. Now see, question number 4A, this was year 2022. Leadership is seen as dealing with change. So your leadership is dealing with change. Whereas administration is viewed as coping with complexity. So if you see the tone and tonality, get to the soul of it, friends. उसकी एकदम रूह तक पहुंचो. See, deal. That means a further confident approach. Whereas coping is somehow managing, somehow adjusting. Okay. Coping with complexity. In this context, discuss the contextuality of leadership and administration for the success of organization. Organization aa gaya. So there will be routine and non-routine functions. Simple. Break it down. Break it down. Okay. So routine function, administration. Non-routine aspect, leadership. I am not saying this is the most accurate way, but this is one of the ways where you can appear to be a sorted fellow in your answers.
Breaking apart becomes easier.
It becomes easier to deal with stuff. Okay, so these kind of abstraction is happening in question. Look at 2023. Now, if you know the dimensions, this is fine. Otherwise, this question can get risky. Another 2023, question number 4A, same on leadership. Redden's model of leadership added third dimension to the existing 2 dimensions of leadership identified by Ohio Studies and Blake and Mouton. Ohio Studies किसकी थी? Chalo, write this question down. Okay, I'm dictating it. Write this in the sense, do it as a homework. Redden model of leadership. Redden, REDD. सब कुछ क्लास में बता दूंगा, घर पे पढ़ोगे नहीं. Redden model of leadership added third dimension to the existing 2 basic dimensions of leadership. To the existing 2 basic dimensions of leadership identified by Ohio Studies and Blake and Mouton. Elucidate. So now you see all those models are coming to use directly or indirectly. You see, with regards to leadership, Drucker says, our very own Peter Drucker, leadership is the lifting of a man's vision to a higher standard. What has happened suddenly? Okay. Leadership is the lifting of a man's vision to a higher standard, the building of a man's personality beyond its normal limitations. Now understand. Second, Keith Davis. Why I am giving some definitions is for the reason that the question can touch upon multiple dimensions. So if you have the definition of a scholar, because at times the questions are so abstract and so interrelated that we don't remember any scholar which exactly fits. So these definitions and the views help. Leadership is the ability to persuade others to seek defined objectives enthusiastically. Now, coming to a question, why we need leadership or significance slash importance of leadership? Why? You see, any organization on paper in its existence for all practical purposes, for its official nature, is a formal organization, whereas there is an informal part. So there is a gap. So what exists between a formal organization and a real organization? There is a gap, and that gap needs to be filled by leadership, so that the inherent weakness of the formal organization can be compensated or countervailed by the leadership, so that the organization attains the goals. Also, any organization is not a static construct, neither does it operate in a static environment. To deal with the changing environment, you need leadership. Also, the organization is a dynamic construct. It is full of internal and external influences, upheavals, churnings. And hence, to control the internal dynamics of the organization, you need leadership. Otherwise, just to get the stuff done, the manager is good enough. Okay. Also, the human membership of an organization, which is there, several factors influence it, both internal and external. And a leadership is needed to bring about that change. Don't we talk, when we talk about Maslow, we say the leadership is needed to provide that path for self-actualization. Same thing here. Okay. So a leader helps in goal setting, whereas a manager merely executes the plan. Okay. A leader is the part of the planning, policy making, execution. A leader carries expertise. He represents his group, discharges the control of group relationships, acts as a motivator. He set as a role model, he sets the example. He's the symbol of the group, father figure or mother figure of the group. Okay? He represents the core values of the organization. So if a leader, let us say, does not come on time, leader does not mark his attendance, leader behaves in a rude manner, will you hold that leader in a high regard? No. You will say manager hai, pagal hai. Right? Things like that happen. But you actually respect somebody because that person becomes a leader. Okay? Also, a leader maintains the balance amongst the competing interests. In this, views of Philip Selznick are important. Now, there are theories of leadership. ये इतना समझ में आ गया? Understood? Understood, friends watching us online? Okay. One is the great man theory. जो पता है उसको ज्यादा time will not spend. You see, it's one of the earliest theory. Okay. Mao, Mahatma Gandhi, Napoleon, though it would not be fair to include Gandhiji in the same club as Napoleon, but the point is they were all accepted as great leaders who were built, who were born with the built-in theories, built-in traits of leadership. But the point is that if you analyze each one of them, the state theory of leadership at a very practical experience falls flat. Because howsoever they became leaders, that was a combination of their personal endeavors, one, two, the situations that they were in. If you look at Gandhiji in till his early 30s, Gandhiji was practically a nobody, just a person belonging to elite segment of the society who happened to study law in UK and was a barrister. But that's it. No achievement. It is that the cause he espoused and how he persisted with that cause. Initially against the discrimination in South Africa and then eventually in the freedom movement in India. Similarly, Napoleon's leadership was known in the battlefield. He was a good administrator, right? So things like that. So they were the product of their circumstances as well. So no scientific basis actually exists. Everything is anecdotal. It is the public portrayal which is, listed as heroic, somewhat mythical, larger than life. The idea is that born administrators are merely imaginary characters. It has no scientific basis. Then comes the trait theory. So you will see the level of vagueness will start coming down. Great man theory, very vague, very subjective. Okay. Trait theory of leadership. The idea was that we identify certain traits that leaders possess, right? Whether physical trait, mental trait, personality traits, and whoso have that traits can, be called as a
leader are born, and in great theory, leader not born can be made.
Can be made. So that, that those traits, for example, appearance, energy, height, intelligence, okay, adaptability, aggressiveness, persistence, initiative, all those things were there. So you use tests, interviews. Okay. But again, this distinction was not very, on the academic front, yes, it provided a framework, but in reality you found people with mixed traits. Okay? No leader will possess all the traits, and hence the comparative analysis became difficult. But you can compare two things which are alike. Okay? And also the definition and etc. were a problem. Then the behavioral, Hanji. Then the behavioral approach. Okay? Primarily pioneered by Kurt Lewin. Okay? So they tried to identify the behaviors. For example, autocratic, democratic, laissez-faire. Trying to find which trait is better. Similar is the case of Tannenbaum and Schmidt theory, where they actually look at what influences a manager's personality. Tannenbaum and Schmidt. पढ़ा होगा ये तो. Then the styles of leadership, the manager identifies the problem, persuades the subordinates, etc., etc. Then the Ohio and Michigan leadership studies. They were carried out after the Second World War. Low structure, low consideration, low structure, high consideration, high structure, high consideration. पढ़ा है ना ये? Michigan, then comes the managerial grid, Blake and Mouton. Okay. Similarly, we can view Likhart's four systems, as system 1, 2, 3, 4 as leadership theories as well. Okay. Then comes the situational theories. You see, the great man, the trait approaches were actually facing a lot of questions, lot of disenchantment. And then somebody said that, leadership is actually affected by the situation. There were different leaders across the time. Good, they ended up being good or bad, that's a different thing. But people like Hitler, Benito Mussolini, they were all the product of their situations. Otherwise, you see, a Bohemian corporal ended up practically ruling the entire Europe for quite some time. I'm talking about Hitler.
Actually, Napoleon also rose after that French Revolution when.
Exactly. So they were the product of their situation. Similar is the case of Gandhi.
The leadership and he rose down.
Right. So the point is that, or for example, the leadership of FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt during the Great Depression, right? Or leadership of Shastriji during 1965 war. He was not, Panditji was hale and hearty. He was a okay minister, doing good work in whatever his portfolio was, and not at all that charismatic. Exactly, he rose to the occasion and he did it. Right. So the point is that, so there were many leaders. Kai-shek was actually leading the Chinese resistance against the Japanese. But look at how Mao comes into the picture and captures everything. And he is relegated to China. Right. So the point is this. So the situational theory of leadership is the most modern and one of the most widely accepted view. It is a more theory of performance orientation. Who actually performs? Who actually adapts? And it believes that through education, training, and development, these skills can be cultivated. So, what every thinker is doing it is looking at situations and it is trying to come about a framework for those situations and in what situation how the leader will act or ought to act rather. So, you have the Fiedler's contingency theory. Fiedler पढ़ा है ना, ये तो पढ़ा हो. Fiedler's model. The LPC scale and everything, है ना? Write a note. This is important. Write a note. Situational theories appeared as a response to the growing disenchantment vis-a-vis the trait theory. Full stop. According to this theory, what a leader does is largely dependent upon the situation or the characteristics of the situation. In which he functions. For example, and write like this. For example, below, authoritarian dash times of crisis. So what will do? Will work very good in crisis, but will fail in normal day-to-day routine circumstances. One good example is Winston Churchill. He won the war for England, but 1946 he loses election. Right? He loses election. Clement Attlee comes into the picture and rest of it you know. Though in 50s he comes back again, but that's a different story. Okay, so that is there. Okay. Democratic leadership where consensus is needed. Laissez-faire leader, it provides immense degree of freedom. But a leader can be perceived as not in charge of the situation. Sadly, example is Dr. Singh. Okay. So the basic idea was to make you write this thing for the fact that the situational theories and contingency theories have a common root. That there is no single correct solution to leadership. Therefore, the contingency approach. Okay. Then is the path goal theory, Robert House. Path goal theory, Robert House. पढ़ा होगा ये भी. Hershey and Blanchard. Hershey and Blanchard. पढ़ा है? Task relationship behavior, high relationship, low task.
Yes, sir.
है ना? पढ़ा होगा, 100% पढ़ा होगा. These are the things that are taught. Then leadership decision theory, Victor Vroom and Philip Yaton. Autocratic 1, autocratic 2, consultative 1, consultative 2. Now, write down a short note on, because these things are coming up again and again, transactional and transformational leadership. पढ़ा है? कहाँ पढ़ा है? ठीक है, अच्छी बात है, पढ़ा है तो, बट फिर भी I guess a lot many people have not actually studied this. Okay, so transactional leadership, basically as the name suggests, it is transactional. So that means there is going to be a give and take, rewards for performance. There would be corrective action. There would not be obsession with rules. Okay. You do it, I need the results kind of. Okay. But the point is that the leader will have to intervene if the standards are not met. So it in a way is a win-win situation where the needs of the subordinates gets aligned with the goal, but the casualty can be values. Okay? So transformational leadership again has undertones of charismatic leadership. Okay? Kind of a thing. So transformational leadership actually blends the behavioral theories with trait theories. Transcending boundaries, transcending cleavages, transcending divides. ठीक है जी? So this is something which is related to the leadership that I wanted to give you. Now, please understand, I've given how many homeworks? Three homeworks, right? 2 PYQs, 1 notes. Okay. Another task for you is, and you do it yourself, don't give it to me, is revise all these theories. You know, Blake and Moulton, Hershey Blanchard, Victor Vroom, Robert House, all these theories of leadership, motivation, McGregor, Maslow, things like that, Herzberg. And if you have any doubts, do ask me in the next mentorship session. Note it down, because this is very important. You see, the questions are coming indirectly, so they may not actually provide you everything that you need. Okay, so be very careful about these things. Right, critical theory is something that we have dealt with. Right, so administrative behavior and this thing has been covered. Next is the organization. Right, and with regards to organizations, largely the idea is philosophical, formal, informal, what does organization entail, authority, delegation, hierarchy, all those things are there. So we will be quickly actually moving through that, gliding through it, and then we'll be looking at accountability control, administrative law. Okay, and then further ahead, vis-a-vis the public policy, personnel administration, civil services, and those aspects. Okay, so we'll keep reflecting upon the PYQs that are there. That is something which is very important because it gives you an insight. So remember, with regards to this, question number 4A, that can be a troublemaker, 20 marker. Abstract from administrative behavior. Okay, I'll be talking about certain models, new models, for example, cybernetic models, etc. Okay, with regards to organization as well, right? Before I close for the day, let me know if there are any queries, right? And we'll take them up accordingly. I'll not be getting into line staff, headquarter, field relationships. I believe that is something that is taken care of. Still, if you have any queries, you can let me know. Just flip through the pages and let me know if there's something you want me to shed light upon again before we call it a class for the day. Remember, we'll be taking up systems theory as well in somewhat detail. पता नहीं लगी ना क्लास, मुझे भी नहीं लगी.
Actually, Monday is more than
It's been more than 2 hours now. 4:30. ठीक है. Yes, yes, Saurabh. Bennis does talk about transformational leadership. Max Weber, yes, discusses the transactional leadership because he was actually working in while Weber was making his theory. He was working in that space and time where the transactional relationship was very much in the offing. Non-programmed decisions as unstructured decision making, not necessarily. Not necessarily. It can be, it cannot be as well. Non-programmed not necessarily can be unstructured. No, both are not the same. At times it can, at times it cannot. Understood? ठीक है? ठीक है. Okay then. Thank you.